was talking about grief in the last video, and I was just really wanting to hit on like what goes on with the feeling of it, the feeling of grief, and how these waves hit, where they come from, how we're connected. And I kind of in the last video got taken off on creating the foundation of what we're actually connecting to, who we're actually connecting to, what energies exist in the grieving state that we connect to, and then we integrate that into our experiences however we see it. And ultimately, it's all of them with everybody, but they hit us in certain ways. Like, if you're heavily in the emotional body state and then you start grieving, then you're going to get hit with a lot of energies from the person you're grieving with, and you will integrate that energy into experiencing it from an emotional body state. If you understand yourself as multiple versions of, or multiple expressions of an infinite energy, as an emotional body, as having an ego, as the infinite expression of one version of an infinite expression of reality, as the physical reality, as the spiritual plane, as a tribe, as a planet, as a creator, as elemental spirits, as elements, as all these different versions of who we are, mashed together as one version of who we are. The human experience is heavily based in feeling an experience, feeling emotions, feeling each other, feeling something, and interpreting that feeling into something that helps us ultimately evolve and grow in this process. So when we come in here, we learn a lot. We come in darkness. We don't know what's going on. We get, in this experience, we get injected into a reality that is so separate from itself. It hasn't remembered its humanity. It's separated itself from not only people on the other side of the planet, people on the other side of the street, people on the other side of the house, and people, ancestors, guides, whoever on the other sides of our interdimensional planes of reality, of who we are. We separate ourselves from our dreams. We separate ourselves from our true vibrance that, if known individually and collectively, will remove the ideas, the illusions of power, the illusions of control that other people install on individuals and on large groups of people. So all of this is intertwined with your work, or into understanding where we fit in this reality and how we fit in this reality. And kind of just bouncing everywhere, all over the place. But looking at it now, it's like the perfect example for me. There's no real straight on train of thought of how grief works, because it hits in waves. Like it hits in these intense, just like out of nowhere you can be hit by something. And if you have to go into that, and something's called for like emotional clearing. So if it comes into your space as, if grief hits you as an emotional moment, then you can either ride that wave or you fight that wave. And there's the healthy way is to understand, all versions of reality, including how we fight, why we fight, and how we ride waves, and how hard waves hit. Because it's not about like being the best surfer, or whatever it is. It's it's really about discovering and discovering yourself, and hitting the depths of whatever it is that has been brought to the surface. Because death, the idea of death and grievance or grief, brings things to the surface. And a lot of those things, like for example my brother, he brought out, even when walking around and interacting with people, he brought out a lot of who the people are inside out to the surface, because he was so out there. When he interacted with people, that's why I didn't really interact with a lot of people so much. It's because it takes a lot of energy to hold that space when there's so many different versions of reality being activated in other people all the time. So he was in his mid to late 20s, 27 years old. That age group is still discovering a lot of things. It's heavily like fluid, and just from like one version, but that goes for everybody. Everybody's changing and moving and growing and letting go, and there's pain there. There's confusion. There's gaps. There's like, for the first 3 days, I couldn't. It felt like I had a whole chunk of like if I had my whole upper body was lungs, and each one was like taking the wind out, and then slowly but surely, like the wind comes back into those lungs, and like we can feel again like we're breathing, and that energy comes from the individual we're grieving about or with from the other side. They're helping with that integration process from how much they vested into this reality from being here, ultimately being here, and not sacrificing for anything else that this reality is. Like, so when we come here in the dark, not knowing and forgetting everything, going into the depths of an illusory reality, falling into the constructs of what life is supposed to be, and then you come back to realizing like, oh yeah, like I am creating, I have an imagination, I am an artist, I am this, I am that, and you click into a frequency, an everyday train of thought, that a fluid of some sort that exists everywhere, that is not just for you. It's a natural light that comes from everybody's heart, that comes from when you're born, and that happens if you're glowing bright enough when you pass. Because a lot of people pass and are just forgotten about or washed over. This is how much our humanity has been manipulated to be forgotten about. And a lot of the times we can get caught up in, like I said before, the gap fillers, but that's not, it's not what it's all about in the long run. Because we're all recovering. We eventually recover or get back to a space of flow after the grieving process, but you're never the same. And a lot of people can grieve themselves into death themselves, or and that's one way. So there's the other ways of experiencing grief. Not just in like movement, but just like feeling. So like grief to death is one way to move, but it's also a feeling. And then there's other versions of feeling, and the grief process hits in all these different versions of feeling. So the more you can feel, the more sensitive you are. That's one thing Tony was. He felt a lot. Like he was a sensitive person. And coming from where we come from, you don't show that, you don't express that much, because it's taken in as a weakness. But he had gotten so good at being himself that he could be himself with anybody all the time. That's why I was so universal, meeting so many different groups and people all over the place, and helping so many, open with so many different age groups of people, and just people, period. No lines of separation or whatever it is. So I guess I get back to the point of grief. Yeah, the waves hit. They go all over the place. And it's really how I'm seeing and experiencing it. It's just a matter of how you are in the moment, and how you are in your process of growth, how you are in your days, how you are in your life, and you take each day one day at a time, each moment one moment at a time, each emotion one emotion, judgmentless emotion at a time, and allow it to lie where it may, and help the others grieving, your family members, with how that space comes into being. And you're going to get hit with a whole bunch of things because people are not in their space. Ultimately, when the grief process is going on, because of so much that's going on. So we have to be patient with each other. We have to be comfortable with being vulnerable, because we're ultimately just vulnerable from being so open and lots of rest is required. That's mainly my thing. Is I really just want to be quiet and rest and allow my dreams to catch back up, actual dreams, and then work in the artistic dream world, a waking space, and just really go one step at a time. So I just wanted to get some kind of something in regards to grief and the grieving process out there, and then yeah, it's it's moving. So until next time, peace, love, and harmony.